college admission bribery scandal. We have some thoughts on that. There were some hearings in Connecticut this week on a lot of new gun bill legislation. And during one of the hearings on March 11th, somebody happened to see a text message that was being typed in during the hearing, and the text message indicated that the writer wanted to, it was a threat against one of the legislators, Senator Rob Sampson, and against NRA supporters. And I can quote the exact language to you when we get to that, but it was a threat to shoot. It was a threat to shoot them, and we want to know why there's been no arrest in that case. We want to talk about some issues here in Connecticut as well, some accountability issues when it comes to the state police speeding on our roads. And there was an incident last year with a trooper, Kevin Miller, who actually died going at a clock speed of about 83 miles per hour. And I have a recent horror story about a state police trooper speeding, and the lights and sirens aren't on, but yet they go over the speed limit. And when I say go over the speed limit, I mean vastly go over the speed limit, and that endangers people's lives. Ed?
Yes.
Okay. Ed has some video. It was a breaking story last week. American News was the first one to get that video of the accident that resulted in that trooper's death. And I should say it was a tragedy, and it's a tragedy that the situation does not appear to have been fixed or is not on the road to being fixed that caused it, and that's a lot of overtime for state police. We asked some other questions. We want to discuss the big question of, which was in the Hartford Courant or the Republican American this past week, is local journalism dying?
Yes.
And by that, the newspaper talks about mainstream media. Is it dying? And a lot of people will say, yes, that's not even a story anymore. Of course it's dying. So what will take its place? And we think we have an answer. There's a Netflix series on right now called Truth and Power. Well, one of the episodes talks about citizens journalism. Obviously, it starts with Ferguson. It goes on to Austin, Texas, where Antonio Buehler, First Amendment rights advocate down there, who got into it by happenstance, as the show explains. He was out on New Year's Eve one night, and he noticed a police officer stopping a car for DWI, and then they ended up pulling a young woman out of the passenger seat, and he video recorded it. And it was the way the police officers reacted to him that resulted in his activism. And we talked last week about how people become activists. People that have no inclination to do so, but then they run into a situation, and the situation makes them into an activist. And I think the interview with Antonio Buehler on Truth and Power, the Netflix series, one of the episodes, underscores that. And we'll be talking a little bit more about citizen journalism, how News Now San Diego fits into that, how News Now Houston fits into that, and whether the replacement for local coverage by mainstream media is actually along the lines of News Now, fill in the municipality, fill in the city, fill in the state, citizen journalists taking the place of the what's been termed the mainstream media, because we do need that. We need people covering what's going on in local news and municipalities, because someone has to continue to hold the government accountable. I think it's questionable whether in the past the mainstream media even held the government accountable. I mean, you have big cases like Watergate, the different scandals, and oh yes, mainstream media does hold the government accountable. But on the other hand, those may be the exception to the rule. I think there are a lot of things that mainstream media ignored in the past that perhaps citizen journalists will not ignore in the future, now that the field has become wide open. One interesting thing, well, a lot of interesting things about that episode from Truth and Power. Mickey Osterrocker. He's the president, or he's litigation counsel.
He's the legal counsel for National Press Photographers Association.
He was on the show, and he talked a lot of young ACLU lawyers, very impressive, talking about how the government controls the message by controlling the messenger.
And I've been saying that for 15 years.
And when the messenger can no longer be controlled, then a whole different message comes out. Was talking about how citizen journalists have changed the narrative when it comes to police-citizen encounters. You have the pushback by police representatives. There was a union representative on there, I think he was a union rep, talking about how police counter by saying when citizens or civilians have cameras and video record, they skew the story by only showing part of it. They only show the part of it where the police officer is subduing somebody. They don't show what happened before that. And I felt like saying, get used to it if that is in fact happening, because that's what the police have been doing to citizens for years. If you read police reports that are written, if you look at police investigations, they skew it totally in their favor to make the arrest, to make the case. So get used to it. And one of the themes of the show was that police officers are now having body cams to counter that, to show the good things they're doing, to show the real story. Good. If citizens recording police officers has resulted in police officers being outfitted with body cameras, then good. That's called success. What we've learned, though, Ed, from the case we did last year in Waterbury involving the Naugatuck police officers, is the police officers turn off their body cams when they don't want whatever they're doing recorded, even though the rules under which they got the grant for those body cams say you can only turn it off in certain situations, and so they turn off the body cams, and they're accusing citizen journalists of skewing the story. They need to look at what they've done in the past and what they're still doing, even though they're outfitted. What's up, Ed? Right. What do you think?
Okay. First of all, let me do something, because he's going to keep calling. JC's going to keep calling.
Well,
I got to find out what JC wants to say.
Okay.
JC, I'm away from the phone, right?
Okay. Let's see if we can get him.
While you're trying to get him, I'm going to continue talking, and you just interrupt me, okay?
JC, what's going on? Okay. All right, I'll go in and check.
So are we feeding out at all now?
I got to go check.
Okay.
This is getting ridiculous. Go ahead. Because I do have something to say.
Other things that we will be discussing today as well, other subjects, if we get to them, because there's a lot that we have to discuss today. Expanding the Supreme Court. What is Congressman Beto O'Rourke talking about? Well, we all know what he's talking about. I mean, this has been tried in the past. He's talking about trying to remedy the fact that the election in 2016 was lost by Hillary Clinton and won by President Trump. Trying to rewrite history so that one of the main factors in the election, that of who would have the ability, who would have the authority to appoint a replacement for Justice Antonin Scalia, or any other justices that would leave during the 4-year or 8-year period, who would have that authority? We've talked on this show about the fact that Ed's case, Peruta v. California, was pending at the time of the election and up to the election in 2016, and how that was a gun rights case that involved whether the Second Amendment applies outside the home. Heller and McDonald found that the right to self-defense in the home by possessing a gun cannot be infringed upon by the government. And Ed's case asked whether the right to carry outside the home in self-defense could be infringed upon by the government, and the Supreme Court still has not answered that question. And a lot of people were concerned about that issue. A lot of people were concerned that if Hillary Clinton was elected, that she would appoint a justice that would predictably fall on the side of the right does not extend outside the home. And that could have very well happened. So what are people like Beto O'Rourke attempting to do now? They're attempting to rewrite history, to fix the situation by stacking the court, by putting more people on the court when a Democrat is elected as president or when Democrats have control, so that they can stack the Supreme Court to have people on the court that will vote in the direction that they want the people to vote. So if you can't win by the rules that are in place, change the rules. Is that not what they're getting at, Ed?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, and I'm going to say something, but I have to check 3 sites.
You go ahead and do that. You go ahead and do that. Next, opt-out form. We are drafting an opt-out form here at Summary Judgment because 16 attorney generals, including attorney generals from Connecticut, California, and I can name all of them later when we get to this, have jointly brought a lawsuit on behalf of their state in which they've been appointed or elected to sue President Trump because they say that his exercise of the national emergency power to build the wall between Mexico and the United States,
I can see it here,
violates the law. Now, I know that I don't agree with that, and I live in Connecticut, and the Attorney General here in Connecticut's brought a lawsuit. In class actions, when a lawsuit's brought on behalf of a class of people, and you say, say you work at a store and you work overtime and you're not paid overtime, and it's a big chain store, then a class comes together and sues for violation of the labor laws and for back wages. And maybe you say to yourself, well, I'm in a different situation. I want to preserve my right to be able to sue on my own. And so you can opt out of that class. And there's a special form that's sent around to opt out of that class. And I want to draft the form and disseminate it, which I will, to opt out of this lawsuit brought by government officials on behalf of the residents of their states. And right now, and I know there are other states that are looking to get involved in this, they're just checking to see if under their state laws, their attorney general or governor has the authority to sue the president and different federal agencies. But right now, we have California involved in this, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, and Virginia. So that's the last of the subjects that we have scheduled for today. We hope that J.C. Playford has an opportunity to call in today, and we will certainly talk to him. Ed, where do you want to start today?
I'll tell you exactly where we're going to start.
We can go in order, or we can just hop around, or if people want to call in. We've listed the subject matters at the Summary Judgment YouTube site, so if you want to review them and call in, we'll go out of order. Right now, you're going to try to call News Now Houston, David Warden, to see if he's available, because that is first on our list today.
David Warden, J.C. Playford.
Okay.
Who's out, I believe, near Yuma, Arizona. Dave. All right, can you see us?
No, I can't. I can't talk on the phone and have you pulled up on YouTube at the same time.
I believe that we're going out to News Now Houston. It's quite a trick to go out to 3 different YouTube sites at the same time, but I want to talk to you about what's going on with Earl David Warden and News Now Houston.
Okay.
Rachel and I have had a conversation. We've listened to some of your, what do you call them, video clips. When a person is taken into custody, and in your case, it was a probable cause warrant, not an arrest. Am I correct?
It is not a criminal charge. It is strictly a probable cause warrant. That is correct.
Right. And you were placed on a $50,000 bond. Am I correct?
Correct.
One of the conditions of bond, and Rachel explained this to me, is when you get put out on bond, one, you're not supposed to be doing drugs. You're not supposed you can do nothing to get arrested while you're out on bond. You got to be walk the straight and narrow and do nothing that can cause you to be taken into custody. Is that a condition of your bond?
That is correct. Well, I don't do drugs or drink, so that's not an issue, but I can't do anything that causes me to go into custody for any reason, or they will revoke my bond.
And it is fair for me to say that every law enforcement agency in the Houston area is probably aware of the fact that you were taken into custody and you were placed back out into society on bond that had conditions.
Yes, and there is actually here locally a couple of law enforcement agencies that have put a bounty out for me. So, yeah, they're aware of it, and they would love to get me for anything.
Well, I want to hear more about that when
they
finishes
They
his
could,
questions.
in fact, arrest you for speaking too loudly to a policeman and call it interfering, breach of peace, disorderly conduct, whatever charges, minuscule charges that they have on the books in Texas. And once you're arrested, they can claim that you violated your bond, put you back inside where you can't get out on bond.
That's correct, and it doesn't matter whether the other charge is valid or if it's fixed or nothing. That's all irrelevant. If I'm arrested for anything, bond is revoked.
Now, I am aware of this, and I'm sure that a lot of people in the First Amendment audit community may be aware of it, but may not be aware of it. In other words, you would be hard-pressed to go out now and do what you have done and been doing for fear that one or more police officers could take you into custody, arrest you, bring you into the police department. They won't give you a bond, present you in front of a judge and say, he did X, Y, and Z, he violated his bond, we want him incarcerated, and he's not to be walking the streets.
Yes, that is correct.
And I don't know about the bounty on your head, but if there's policemen that don't like you or don't like auditors or don't like people who refuse to put their camera down and they know that person's on bond, they can create shit for you big time.
That is correct.
So, I have no problem with the fact that you sit in your car, you try to tell people what's going on. I know that you intend to release a recent polygraph examination that you subjected yourself to.
That is correct.
And it's going to be released on Monday?
As soon as I get the report from the polygrapher, the written, documented report, I will be publishing it.
Now, somebody is going to try and say that you cherry-picked the polygraph examiner or you cherry-picked the questions that a polygraph examiner is going to ask you. They're going to say that right up front.
Well, they can say whatever they want. I mean, the reality is I picked the best polygrapher in the Houston area, the absolute best, with the best equipment, so that nobody could dispute, because I knew that there would be people that would come back and try to dispute it, but I did the best I could with selecting the best polygrapher with the best equipment and the best reputation in the area. And as far as the questions go, the polygrapher came up with the questions based on the police report. So the questions that were asked, I believe, were valid and legit.
All right.
But there's always going to be people that say, "Oh, you beat the polygraph," or "You're trained on how to beat the polygraph," or whatever. It doesn't matter.
Let me
Doesn't
see.
matter.
Let me see if my memory can serve me today. And I'm going back 45, 50 years when I had to be subjected to a polygraph. What happens is the polygraph examiner comes in and hooks you up. He's checking your respiration, your perspiration, and your breathing, and they probably got other things they're doing with it now too. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
The guy that I went to actually has it's like a $30,000 polygraph system. It's got like a special chair. It's not like a regular polygraph chair. I've taken polygraphs before, and I've never taken anything like this. And then the polygraph was scored by computer, and then the examiner comes and scores you as well. And the scores were very similar. On all the questions asked, I scored between a +3 and a +8, which is about as good as you can get.
Let me, because Rachel is being quiet right now, but let me see if I can get through this. When I had my polygraph examination, the examiner sits and he talks to you and he explains to you how the polygraph is going to go, how the examination is going to take place. Am I correct?
Correct.
And then he asks you some basic questions. They're plain vanilla questions. What is your name? What is your date of birth? He may have your driver's license and he'll say, is this your driver's license? And you're basically answering yes or no. If he sees something in the examination, like they asked me a question, now I'm going back to when I was 21 years old, and they said, since you were 16 years old, have you stole anything that had more than $10 in value? And I was afraid to say no. I had to say yes. And when you say yes to a question like that, he'll pause and he'll say, explain that. And I had to explain stealing something more than $10 in value. And if he's satisfied, he makes a note. And then he asks the question, like the same question, but just a different way, and says, based on what you have told me, is that all that you want to, whatever? And you say yes. Am I correct?
Yes.
All right. So if somebody asks you, have you ever had sex with a woman? Well, yes. Have you ever had sex? And then they'll ask you all kinds of questions. And my polygraph examiner was at the time a guy by the name of Trooper Dewey. And they give the polygraph report to the police chief. And the police chief called me in. This is before I got sworn in as a policeman. And he goes, well, you did pass your polygraph. He said, but here's what the polygraph examiner said. And I think I may have a copy of it someplace. He goes, Mr. Peruta is honest to a fault. In other words, I was admitting things that the normal person would try to avoid. For example, did you ever steal anything more than $10? Yes. And he said, well, okay, it's the pause, talk. And I said, got to tell you something. When you're in combat and you're a Marine, you steal a lot of Army shit because they got better equipment than you do. And I said, and I was stealing Jeeps and radio systems and everything else to take out in the bush with me from the Army supplies. So yes, the answer was yes. Then he asked me, and now mind you, when I took the polygraph, I was 20. I got sworn in 3 days after my 21st birthday, but I was illegal to drink alcohol. And they asked me a question. Have you at any time drank in excess? Well, shit. The night before the polygraph, there was a retirement party for one of the policemen that was at the house I was living at, and I was hammered. I mean, they got me hammered. The cops got me hammered. And then they told me, now you know they're going to ask you tomorrow if you drink in excess. So there was that one. And then they asked the question, had I ever slept with another man? And I had to say, no, I'm serious. And I had to say, well, I think I got to say yes to that. And they said, why? We went out in early January 1970. 3 guys were having a birthday party. And we went all over to this high school teacher's house to spend the night. We all stayed there because we were hammered, we were partying. And in the middle of the night, the high school teacher came up under the sheets from the foot end of the bed into the bed I was sleeping in. Now, I didn't do anything and nothing happened. But I said yes, and I told him about it. So the polygraph is basically a simple yes or no to the questions that he formulates. What does the police department want to know? What is in the police reports that you're being polygraphed about? And he'll go through all of the elements in the report, and he'll ask you, and you simply yes or no. And I guess they can tell by your breathing, your perspiration, and your... I must have been breathing hard on a couple of those questions. But what I'm saying is, you subjected yourself to a polygraph, I'm sure at your own expense,
Yes.
to try and put to rest at least the statements that are being made about you in writing by one or more law enforcement agencies.
It's to put some of it to rest. Yes, I mean some of it I can't release or won't be released, and some of it will be. I can't release anything that has to do with the current case.
Yep.
However, there were other allegations that I took a polygraph on previously, and for some strange reason, the police can't find that polygraph now. So I retook it. I went and retook it. I passed it the first time, and I passed it this time. It's that simple. Everything else, there are other things going on, and the short version is this: the police know they have one chance to get me, and this is it. So they are throwing everything they can into this, and they're getting caught. They're lying, and they're getting caught. And the district attorney will have all the documentation for that this week. So, what comes, comes.
David, are you still doing auditing? Are you still doing that, or have you put that on hold given the conditions of release that you're under and the likelihood or the foreseeability that you might run into law enforcement and possibly be arrested if you continue auditing?
No, I know for a fact that if I go out and do any auditing here locally, or if I'm out auditing and recognized, I will be arrested for something, anything. So no, I've had to put auditing on hold for the moment, but I'm still catching up on some other things. I have some videos that I haven't posted yet, some audits that I did before this kicked off, and I'm trying to catch up on the Tuttle mess, the 2 people that were murdered by police in their home, and the police union down here is just going nuts, and their hand is in this mess too, and we've documented that as well. It's actually in the case file, but that's kind of what I'm focusing on for the moment. That's all I can do at the moment.
Yeah, and David, I know when we spoke to you last week, you talked about going back in time to this confrontation or controversy you had at the Shell Oil property or facility in Deer Park. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
Now, you had mentioned 2017, but I mean, it goes back further than that. I know that there was an incident back in 2015 that resulted in your arrest, correct?
Correct.
And
Him and Turner.
You and Philip Turner.
Yes. Same officers. They arrested me for interfering, and they pulled Philip Turner onto Shell property and arrested him for criminal trespass, and it's all on video.
So was there some kind of a focus on Shell Oil, or was it just coincidence that you've run into situations there because you've run into situations there, and you do this everywhere else as well. It's just that you ran into problems there. Is there some investigation you're doing of Shell Oil, or we're doing?
Yes.
And
I
what?
was.
And I'm very interested in that. Do you have time to talk about that, or can you?
Sure. It's really simple. No, it's really simple. That case is resolved. So I had been to Shell and videoed and had interactions with the police there and had not had a problem. And I had told them that I was going to come back to get video of all the trash along the highway. And when I did, the situation was different. When I'd been there previously, the business office was closed. When I came the second time, the business office was open, which means that Shell Security's management people were on site. And they came out and directed the officers to find something to arrest me for. They didn't care what, just arrest him and book him for something. And come to find out that this is actually typical. I have Harris County Sheriff's deputies that used to work there that had contacted me after this happened and told me that they were let go because they wouldn't file criminal charges on people that the Shell Security staff wanted charged. And basically, if they wanted you arrested for something, the officers better find something to arrest you for, or they were going to lose that $80 an hour extra job they had. And so, if you listen to my arrest, you can hear the security guy that's there with the deputy tell him, arrest him for something. And that's just what they did. And of course, the police reports didn't match the video, so the case ends up getting dropped. But so that kind of led me to looking at Shell Security, and the more I looked at how they did things, the more I realized just how poorly trained or their operational security was just very poor.
How they were micromanaged by their employer.
So it sounds like what the allegation involves is a large corporation,
very large,
hiring law enforcement officers for private duty,
right,
and paying them quite well,
yes,
to almost gain control over local law enforcement for corporate purposes. Is that accurate?
Yes, I would say that's accurate.
Okay, well, that's a problem.
And Shell is a monster in Deer Park. I mean, the police department there, they own that police department, as you can see. This all stems from the fact that I did a video. What started this was I did a video critiquing Shell Security and how poorly they operate, and that is what got all this started.
And Shell Security, that issue's kind of separate from the issue that I've already that I just specified, the control over local law enforcement. Because, I mean, I guess if a corporation wants to have bad security, that's their right. If they don't want to train their security, that's their right, I guess. But
when they start hiring these police officers and make them behave like mercenaries, they cross the line.
Well, that's different. So when you say security, are you talking about private duty police officers, or are you talking about civilian security companies that bring
both
security?
No, it's both, but primarily, the people that can hurt you are the off-duty police officers.
Absolutely.
Because in Texas, an off-duty police officer is still a police officer. So they have arrest powers and all of that. So, imagine the conflict of interest that exists when these police officers, they're looking out for themselves. They're not interested in protecting your rights and doing what they're supposed to do. And the normal checks and balances that they would have, when they're working as a police officer, the normal checks and balances that they would have don't exist. They don't exist. So they go out and do whatever they want to do, and they get away with it.
Let me give you another for instance. You have a multi-billion-dollar corporation that has a footprint in Deer Park that is huge. It's a refinery.
Right.
And they hire off-duty police officers to work in their security field. And when somebody like David is standing on a public sidewalk videotaping, those off-duty police officers, under the authority of Shell Oil, go out to the sidewalk and confront the person who is doing a First Amendment audit. And if they give them any shit, the off-duty police officer calls back and they make a phone call. Now the on-duty members of law enforcement show up at the sidewalk. And the on-duty officers are looking at their brother officers in a private duty status, saying, well, they know what they're talking about, and we're not going to go against them. We're going to do what they want us to do because they're our brother officers. So there's that aspect that Shell Oil knows that they have that influence over the local law enforcement population.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for delving into that a little bit in more detail, David, because that is a problem. And does it still exist? Is that still going on?
As best I can tell, so Shell has always asserted that they own all the property. They own the street out there. They own everything, which is total BS. But they have recently painted lines on the sidewalk out there, designating where their property line is. We used to have problems with Shell security, private security, not police officers, coming off property and chasing us and trying to ram us with their trucks and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And they have ceased doing that, as best I can tell, as well. So there have been some changes made. Now, like I said, what got this started was the president of Shell didn't like a video I put out critiquing Shell security and how easy it was to get information on these people. You know, information that could be used to compromise them and Shell's, ergo Shell's security. And currently, the Deer Park Police Department, and this video is on my channel, it's up, there's nothing threatening in it, and in the description I clearly state that I do not condone acts of violence against anybody and that I would not publish anybody's information, because I won't. That's not what it's about. But because I dared to critique them and say negative things about them, Shell Security, I'm sorry, not Shell Security, but the president of Shell is attempting to get the Deer Park Police Department to file criminal charges against me for harassment. Okay, and there's no harassment to this.
Oh.
Basically what they're saying is, you don't dare speak about us, or we'll arrest you.
Let me ask you a question, David,
Sure.
because there's people that are saying this.
Okay.
Did you make a recorded or simple verbal statement about the head of Shell Security or the head of Shell, his family, his family members, and you knew where they lived? Just yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, now stop right there.
Okay.
I believe that if I was being hassled and they're coming after me, I could say to the person responsible, now hold on a minute. I know where you live. I know where your wife lives. I know where your kids live. And if I wanted to, I could probably find out where they go, make complaints, and get them arrested in a place where you don't have a lot of influence. But I would have probably made some kind of a statement back if I was really being hassled. So there's people that say that you shouldn't have done it. I probably believe you shouldn't have done it, but you did do it, and I understand why somebody would make a tit-for-tat statement back.
And it wasn't that kind of statement. Okay, all it was, and again, this video is on my channel. You can go find it. I never said that I was going to his house. I never made threats against anybody. I just said that the information was made available to me because of their poor security, and the information, if it were found out by a terrorist, it could be used to compromise people. Okay, that's all I said. I never at any point made any threats against anybody, and I don't do that. I don't do that.
We're going to get to you, JC.
And David, were you arrested for making a threat?
No.
Yeah.
No, but they are trying to file a charge based on my exercising my right to critique these people. And keep in mind, so Shell has formed basically their own city. Okay? So they are quasi-government officials. They receive protection and funding from the U.S. government, Department of Homeland Security. All right? So they are fair game for First Amendment protected activities, including free speech and criticism of them, so long as you don't make threats. And again, there was absolutely no threats made. Like I said, I don't do that. It's not just, there's no reason for it.
Okay, I would like, there's another topic that we're going to talk about in this 2-hour program, but I want to bring some aspects of that topic into this topic for everybody on the other side of the camera's benefit. It's been all over the news about how very wealthy, influential people, some of whom have recognizable names in Hollywood, were able to pay a fixer, to pay people in colleges to have their children go to the head of the line and get admitted to schools by a whole bunch of devious activities, paying bribes, doing this, doing that, whatever. Now, that is the effect that money can have on public officials. For example,
and these weren't public officials, but the principal's
well,
the same.
whoa. When you have somebody get into the University of Southern California...
It's private, isn't it?
It's a public school. It's a public university.
Are you sure?
University of California is a state university.
Well, but this is University of Southern California, and...
See if it's public or private.
I will.
But what I'm saying is...
It sounds public.
Yale is private. Harvard is private. Some of the other schools are private. But I believe that the University of Southern California may in fact be a part of the California University.
No.
Okay, well, you'll know more. You went to college. I didn't. But what I'm saying is this. If you have money...
It's private. It is.
Is it? Okay.
It is, yeah.
If you have money, you can convince what you would normally think is a straight-up person to bend the rules, to do what you're asked to do, not told to do, what you're asked to do because you're looking at a pile of money on the table. And I believe that Shell has that type of influence in a community where they may own 90% of the tax base in the town.
Has there ever been a Freedom of Information request for a list of the private duty job assignments to Shell over a period of time, the past 10 years or the past 5 years?
Okay, so Shell is a incorporated city. It's part of an incorporated city. There's actually several refineries involved in it, but Shell is the big dog. And I have made open records requests, and they say that they are exempt, that they don't have to provide open records, even though our county commissioner's court has said they do. So, but it takes funding to go to court. After my unlawful arrest and Philip Turner's unlawful arrest out there, we looked at suing. And basically what our lawyer said was this. He said, they have so much money that they will tie you up in court forever and cost you a fortune. We don't have the funding to fight them.
Well,
so there was no lawsuit.
How about an open records request to the municipal police department, the Deer Park Police Department?
Let me tell you what's wrong with that.
Right.
If Shell calls up the Deer Park Police Department and says, I need private duty officers to work on my property.
Right.
Then they're working for the city on Shell's property. But if Shell knows a pool of officers and they go to them privately and say, we'd like to offer you a job, a part-time job. Now, normally law enforcement, members of law enforcement, have to go to their employer and say, I've been offered part-time employment with Shell Oil. Will you approve my working that private job? We had someone who worked for the state and was working part-time for a local community, and the state was able to say, you can't work in that part-time job for that local community.
So let's clarify, David. Do you know which one it is? Does Shell go through the police department and hire private duty, or do they just have a pool of officers that they hire on their own?
I do not know the answer to that.
That'd be interesting to find
Hold on.
out.
I would think the officers would want to do it on the books because it goes toward their pension as opposed to.
So yeah, we'll have to find out if it's on the books or not, and perhaps that's another way to
let me
go
tell
at
you,
it.
we don't have the resources to find out whether it's on the books or
Yeah,
not.
but there's people listening
But
out there
there
who
are,
may be interested.
well, I was going to say, there are people on the other side of the camera
Yeah.
who probably live in the Houston area who could probably ask the questions. And that's all you want to ask is you ask Deer Park for a list, not of names,
What?
but how many private duty jobs have come through the police department for Shell Oil's refinery job. For example.
And what's their policy? I mean, a lot of police departments, we know a lot about this in Connecticut. Not that applies in Texas necessarily, but so we're just talking. But here in Connecticut, there's seniority that goes into it. When a private duty job offer comes in, they go down the seniority list, or they go, who last had a private duty job, they go to the bottom of the list, you offer to the next person on the list. There's different ways of doing it. Do they have a
because the
policy?
senior guys were taking there were people that were getting all jobs. But let me go a step further on this, okay? If a police officer, and I'll give you the perfect example. What I'll do is I'll give you a perfect example. Yale University is in New Haven, Connecticut. And when they have a major event, a football game, Yale versus Harvard, two private schools, they call up the New Haven Police Department and say, we need 20 officers for Saturday's football game to direct traffic, for crowd control, and to deal with any intoxicated people or whatever.
They may, but I just want to point out, we don't want to forget that Yale
has their own police
has their own
department.
police
But
department.
they don't have the resources to staff a major sporting event.
They may not.
They have their employees, and they could have auxiliaries, people that are sworn and trained, but they only come in for private duty jobs. Construction companies that are doing road work in Connecticut will go and hire a state trooper in a state trooper controlled town or a local police officer to come out and direct traffic by the hole in the highway. So I think that you could look at Deer Park's budget
Maybe not David.
expenditures. Yeah, maybe not David.
Right.
Their budget expenditures every year for extra duty assignments, because what the community will do is they'll say, you want one officer? We need $500 an hour. We're going to pay him $100 an hour, and the city's going to get $400 an hour, because they have to pay the pension, the health insurance, the unemployment, the workman's comp, all of that there. So if you look at Deer Park's budget and you go to the police department, you should be able to see who are the people who hire police officers for outside extra duty jobs, and there'll be a list of names of who has sent checks to Deer Park, Texas for police overtime or extra duties.
Okay. David, I don't know if
I want to check and make sure we're captured while you're talking.
Okay, I don't know if you can talk about this or not, but you had mentioned earlier a bounty. Can you go into that a little bit more, or do you want to?
Well, this has been an ongoing thing. The Border Patrol has a bounty on me, and some local constables have put a bounty on me. It's it's not anything that's official. There's no paperwork on it. It's just supervisors having dinner with the guys saying, hey, whichever one of you can get old Dave on a legitimate charge, we got something special for you.
You know,
and it may be a $20 reward. It may be getting to use a new patrol car. I can't tell you what the reward is, but it does exist, and it does happen. I mean, Ed can probably tell you about it. When police have somebody that they want to target, they have their methods.
Every community has one or more people in the community where every law enforcement officer knows their name. And it's almost like walking into a neighborhood pub in Baltimore and they're taking a football pool behind the bar by the square. And they say, okay, whoever is the first person to put a set of cuffs on David Warden or Ed Peruta or Rachel Baird and gets a conviction, we got a pot. There's a pool going as who's going to get them first. That does happen.
Or maybe not even a conviction, just putting the cuffs
Well,
on.
I mean, and Dave, we're going to have to go because JC's probably biting at the bit.
That's what I wanted to add in. I knew I'd forgotten something. We filed a lawsuit in 2012 that's up pending before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on this whole media credential issue in the county of San Diego, where the government, the San Diego Police Department, issues media credentials that somehow are given recognition, we allege, above and beyond media
Special
credentials
privileges
issued by American News, which is talk about the messenger controlling the message. But anyway, my point is, in the course of that lawsuit, we discovered that a picture of JC, almost like a wanted poster, or very similar to a wanted poster, had been posted at, where was it posted? The Marine Corps base, right?
Miramar Marine Corps Air Station's MP facility.
Right, as if he were some sort of dangerous person. And we had asked the public information officer, Jan Caldwell, about that. And initially, as I recall from the transcript and being there, she denied it. But then when it turned out we had a little more information
And
about
let me
she admitted
assure
it.
you that our source of information that the photograph was up on the wall for every Marine MP to see and to know who JC was rock solid.
So you and JC definitely have that in common. So, David, thank you so much again for giving us the amount of time you gave us. It's always...
And I need to say something right now. Mm-hmm. We're going to go because, like I say, JC, I think, is biting at the bit in Yuma, Arizona, out near Yuma. And I'm still waiting for a phone call from Joe in Chicago for a Chicago report. And I just want to say something. I've been toying with the idea. Mm. And Rachel has kind of supported the idea and come up with it, so to speak, that I've received emails, from individuals who watched the show on News Now Houston, who are asking me to issue media credentials, Philadelphia, other parts of the country, down in Florida, and I'm inclined to do it if I know who I am issuing the credentials to. And again, I'm going to say this. When you and I first talked, David, I asked questions, you had answers, and you concealed nothing from me. So, I don't know where they're getting off that maybe they didn't know about it and they're shocked about your past. I'm not shocked about it.
And we're going to go right to JC now. Is that okay, David?
Yep. Talk to you guys later.
Have a good week.
And you'll see us again next week.
Summary judgment.
Hey, girl.
There he is. It's JC Playford. And we're going to queue up that video, the most recent one you did from Arizona. But we'll talk to you a little bit first about what you're doing, and then we'll play the video, okay?
Okay, but hold on. Before we do that, let's go to Dave for a second.
Sure.
Shell Oil Company. Okay, let me tell you something a lot of people don't know. Our police in San Diego union was broke a couple of years back. It was broke by one of their cops. Shell Oil Company tried to hire that cop who went to college with one of their executives to break the union so they could hire the Chinese. And that's a plan they're working on right now. They're trying to break the union to hire the Chinese, and nobody knows it, but that's what they begin to do.
JC, you're out in Lanka, Arizona.
TACNA, T-A-C-N-A.
TACNA, whatever it is.
Yep.
You're about 20 miles east of Yuma, along Route 8.
Good point. Yuma is all over the national news right now
For what?
because they've been taking in so many illegal aliens.
Is it a sanctuary city?
Well, it gets better than that. Okay, Yuma is not declared a sanctuary city, but it's county supervisor for the 4th district, Mr. Anthony Reyes. In the past, has been convicted of smuggling illegal aliens. He's a county supervisor for a border city.
Well, somebody elected him and somebody appointed him, so that's the will of the people, right?
Yeah. But
Okay.
here's what I'm going to come up with now. When we realized how many people they were taking in down here in Yuma, Yuma no longer can hold them. You know what Yuma has done because they're short-staffed? You know those highway checkpoints that I'm constantly screaming about?
Stop right there.
They're all...
Stop right there. Stop right there. We're talking to the world. We're talking to the United States. We're talking to the Northeast, the Southeast, the Northwest, the Central United States. And some people have absolutely no concept of on Interstate 8, there's a checkpoint. On Interstate 5, there's checkpoints where you have to drive through and they're reading your marker plates. They're observing who's in the vehicles. They come into your vehicle at time and they ask you questions, like with the RV. They'll go in, do you have anybody else in the vehicle with you? Do you have any guns? Do you have any ammunition? They ask all kinds of questions. So, JC, a lot of people don't understand that there are highway checkpoints run by the Border Patrol on our major interstate highways in the border states.
Within the United States.
Inside the United States.
No, a lot of people are not aware of that.
This national emergency, this emergency, this national emergency going on, is Trump's 100% correct. They don't have the manpower to staff those checkpoints because they've been taking in so many people on the border itself that they have to move their people from the checkpoints to the border.
So the level,
All checkpoints are closed.
they're closed. So
They're a little over a week.
so there's no checking going on. People are just driving as they.
Yeah, the highway checkpoints are what I'm talking about.
Now let me go back 20 years and bring forward one of my statements I made in a small town in Connecticut when they were reducing the staff on a local police department. They used to have 6 districts. 6 officers worked on a shift. And they were trying to save money, so they reduced it down to 4 districts. And I went to the city council and I asked this question. Why don't we go back in time when there were 4 districts and you came to the town council and justified the 5th district, and then let's listen to the conversations and read the minutes of when you came back to the council and justified the 6th district. And then we have to ask the question, are those reasons for adding District 5 and District 6 now non-existent? So I would say this to the government. When you chose to spend the money to erect these, it looks like a big toll booth, yeah, but it's bigger than that. The checkpoint, the what's the word on the infrastructure of a checkpoint, and then you budgeted the money to staff the checkpoint. You had to come up with reasons why these checkpoints were necessary and justify the expenditure to build them and the continuing expenditure to maintain them and to staff them.
And does that problem still exist?
Did the problem disappear, or is the problem times 10 now?
And by the way, I think these checkpoints existed before President Trump was elected.
Absolutely.
Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Somebody else.
Remember, we one time filmed one of them burning down a few years back, and it went on every news organization in America.
We did.
So the principle is that the volume of illegal immigration in Yuma and perhaps other places is overwhelming the manpower to such an extent that the manpower at the checkpoints is no longer available or has been decreased.
Have to be reassigned to perform other duties and are taken away from the checkpoints.
So the law against illegal immigration is still on the books, but the effect of the volume of it and the fact that there's not the manpower and not the will, I guess, to enforce the laws against it, make it de facto legal. And I think this is a strategy to overwhelm the system so the laws cannot be enforced. So what is illegal becomes basically legal because nobody is enforcing the law.
Rachel, you know as an attorney that the court systems in the United States are always trying to clear their docket, to clear the list of people facing trial. They have to find a way that when so many people come in, they got to get out. Now, 4th of July, Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, New Year's Eve, you'll always hear law enforcement saying, we're going to be out in force looking for drunk drivers. We're going to be out in force looking for speeders. Okay? We're going to be out with checkpoints and whatever, DUI checkpoints. My question would be, why aren't you doing this every weekend? Why aren't you doing this every day? Well, because they can't hand out so many summonses that the 10% of the people who choose to go to trial, instead of being 100,000 people, becomes 1 million people, and they're all sitting on a piece of paper in the courthouse that says, we have to go through 1,000 cases today, not 100.
That could be one argument. Another could be that you're not going to... Yeah.
See,
Go ahead,
I
JC.
have always said the best way to beat our court system is for us to do like the government does. Instead of allow ourselves to be divided and conquered and worry about everything, take their plea deals, shove them up their ass and say, I want a trial.
Right.
Jurors today are more keen to understand what's going on than the government that's trying to bullshit you, lie to you, and rob you.
I love the way JC brings it down to the basic terms because he's right. Our jurisprudence system, our trial courts, the criminal courts, do not have the resources to give everybody a trial. They're not there.
Should plead not guilty, and I want a speedy trial.
The problem is that people are on their own when they're arrested. And like it or not, a lot of people are arrested for things they actually did and can actually be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. And they're given a plea deal for a lot less than they're going to get if they go to trial. And whatever they did, they're convicted of.
But the question is our criminal justice system, the courts, is it staffed to handle giving everyone a trial?
It's not.
That is the answer.
But that would be a waste of money because most people don't want a trial for very good reason.
Rachel, you're 100% correct. But what I'm saying is, in in theory, everyone who is arrested has the right to a trial. And if everyone chose to exercise their right to be tried, okay, the system would be sending out messages to, and they have done this, sending out messages to law enforcement saying, for little minor things, don't make the arrest. We're overloaded. We're overbooked. We can't handle it. And you know that's true, is that they say minor crimes, littering, jaywalking, things like that. They don't want to see that come in to the judicial system because it's only jamming everybody up in the courthouse.
Now, let's go back to Dave again, if I can. Shell Oil Company, police officers being hired by Shell Oil Company. Now, what a lot of people fail to realize is that it was the businesses, the corporations, that created the police. It wasn't we, the people. It was the businesses in these small desert towns that hired bouncers to clean the drunks up off the street and remove them. That is slowly where our police departments came from. Well, still to this day, and we have shown it many times, and you see it on every video. If a citizen is standing out on a street corner filming the business, the cop takes the business side.
Let me give you an example of that one. For a period of time, on two different occasions, I lived in Indian River County, Florida. Indian River County is a big county on the East Coast, and it has a sheriff's department. And the sheriff's department is basically the law enforcement agency for what's referred to as the unincorporated areas of the county. They don't have little governments. They have little neighborhoods, but they don't have governments. And then you have over on the beach, it's called Beachside. And it's that barrier island that goes down along the ocean. And that's where the big money people tend to live, shop, go out to dinner, drink, and drive home. There is a small enclave of Indian River County called Johns Island. And if you drive up A1A, Johns Island is probably 2 miles north to south, less than a mile wide, from the ocean to the intercoastal waterway. And the people have so much money in Johns Island, all gated communities, that they decided that they would rather pay the taxes and have their city council hire and employ their own police department with their hand-picked police chief so that they don't get treated like the people that live in other areas of the county. In other words, Miss Baird, you've had too much to drink. I'll give you a ride home, rather than taking you to jail. Rather than taking you to jail, I'll drive you home. Or Miss Baird, do you have somebody that can come and pick you up and drive you home, and we'll just call it a night?
Yeah, but you have to stay within that little area of their jurisdiction. As soon as you go out of it, you're fair game, right?
No, and I'm telling you that there are areas around Hartford where I know a person who was on a police department in a very prominent community. Was West Hartford. It's a very affluent West Side community.
Parts of it are.
Parts of it are very affluent.
Hartford's moving into West
Parts
Hartford,
of it are
so
very.
it depends.
Parts of it are very affluent. And when a police, and I'm talking about years ago, it could be different now, but when the police officer would go out to a domestic, it would get resolved right there in the house.
Of course, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Never taking anybody into custody where their name's going to appear on a police blotter and in the paper the next day.
Well, you know, yeah.
And guess what other department doesn't mess with the rich?
San Diego.
CPS.
Who?
CPS, Child Protective Services.
Oh,
Kids from the rich.
JC, that's what I was just going to talk about, and I was going to talk about this on the show last week. It has to do with Humboldt County, California. Is that a county?
San Diego has a situation with that.
Go ahead.
And there were two sisters that made national news. They were interviewed. They were 8 and 6 years old, and they live on a large expanse of property, and they went missing. And the parents, called the police. There was a big search, and they had been gone, I think, overnight. They were actually gone overnight, and the parents didn't know where they were, and they were 8 and 6 years old.
They survived in the woods.
They survived in the woods. And they were being interviewed like they were heroes, and everybody was glad they were okay. Of course, you're glad.
And one of the girls was saying, "Oh, I watched the TV shows on how to survive, and we survived."
Right. And I'm sitting there thinking, because I have represented, clients involved in child protective services or whatever. I have seen people charged with risk of injury.
Whoa.
I have seen people whose children have been taken away from them
Whoa.
for a lot less.
Absolutely. Close to home. Exactly what you're talking about. I have someone who's very close to me who was watching his young son in the house during the day. He worked nights, and he laid down for a 1-hour nap, and his son was sleeping. Well, the son woke up before the father did. And the son, 3, 4, 5 years old, takes his father's car keys, opens the front door, walks out and starts walking down the sidewalk. And I get a phone call on my cell phone. Oh, and he took his father's cell phone. And I got a phone call from a total stranger saying, who is this? I said, what do you mean, who is this? You called me. Who are you? Well, we found this 4-year-old boy walking down the sidewalk, and there's no adult around. And I looked at the phone number, and I said, oh, I know exactly who he is and where he lives and who his father is. And they took the child home, and I got to tell you, law enforcement got involved, Child Protective Services got involved, threatening to take the child away from the parent. And, it's every parent's nightmare to say, oh, my God, he's gone. And the child just thinks, well, I'm going to do like Daddy does. I'm going to walk down to the corner store.
But yeah, but back to
I'm
the...
going to get the trash and bring it in.
Yeah, back to the point where people are treated differently. People in urban areas, in less wealthy areas, when something happens with their child where the child conceivably is in danger or not being monitored, then the full weight of the court system comes down upon them. When you're white and you live in Humboldt County, I guess, and your children go missing overnight, nobody's asking any questions, and everybody just thinks it's a really cute deal, and I'm offended by that. I'm offended by that.
Me too, 100%. We had a case in San Diego where CPS was trying to get a child away from a family, away from a woman who lived in Del Mar. We know Del Mar to be rich. Well, CPS failed, the child died. Not a single news organization in San Diego covered that child drowning in that tub at mother's hands. Not a single one.
JC, Rachel has some information because we got a lot of topics today.
Right.
And we need to get back to our topics because we got like 45 minutes. But
I think we can do it.
check this one out. Rachel represented an individual named Edward Ted Topier, who is involved in family court and sent an email talking about a judge. He got arrested, he got tried, he got convicted, and he did time, and he was incarcerated for a substantial amount of time.
Right.
Okay? Now, this past week, a couple of weeks, the state legislature has had public hearings on firearm issues. And Rachel is going to be able to read to you. Someone in the crowd was able to snap a photograph of a person who was texting on their phone, and there's a photograph of the text message from this female in the audience to someone else, either in the audience or somewhere in the world. Okay?
Correct.
Now, she's going to read it.
Yeah, what the text said exactly, verbatim, if I had a gun, comma, I'd blow away Sampson and a large group of NRA. It ends there.
Right. Now, does that mean she's going to get a gun and shoot me because I'm a member of the NRA?
Now, Sampson is a state
State rep,
senator.
state senator. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
No, he's a state senator. Yeah.
And the Capitol Police escorted the woman out of the hearing and let her walk into the wind and said, it's First Amendment.
Now, these are the same police officers, or the law enforcement community, I should say, who have no problem seizing phones in cases that are totally unrelated to anything involving the phone, but they just want to seize the phone to see if there's more information on the phone about it. If there's any phone that should have been seized by law enforcement, it's a phone where the owner in public is saying, if I had a gun, I'd blow away Sampson, who, by the way, is in the same room, and a large group of NRA. Why didn't they seize this phone to see what other conduct?
Well, let
or
me
threats
add
were on it?
the 800
She
pound
was a Democrat.
the 800-pound gorilla in the room is this. They just had an incident in Christchurch, New Zealand, where an individual went into a mosque and killed 59 people. Had that person sent a text message that the public knew about prior to that shooting, would that person have been confronted, taken into custody, charged, tried, and sent to do time?
Yes.
I believe the answer is yes.
In this case, this was a political Democrat talking about Republicans. And Democrats can say and do whatever they want in America, but Republicans can't.
Well, okay, that's that topic. Now let's deal with another topic. What's his name? O'Rourke? Beto O'Rourke?
What a joke.
He
Mr. President, sir.
He is now saying, and other people are thinking about it, stacking the Supreme Court of the United States with 15 judges rather than 9. And the only reason that this topic is on the table in 2019 is because a conservative Republican businessman who was not part of the political establishment was elected to the position to fill vacancies on the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's if Hillary Clinton had been elected, there would have been more liberal jurists being appointed to the Supreme Court, and this issue would not be a topic.
No.
When I won my case in the 9th, initially in a 3-judge panel, Camilla Harris, never got involved in my case because why should I? He's never going to get a favorable decision out of the 9th. The shock was 2-1 my favor. Some judge says we need to have en banc. We need to have Mr. Pruda's case reheard by 12 justices of the 12 judges on the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals. And the 12 judges ruled against me.
Judge shopping.
And I said, I want you to think about this. Why isn't every case heard by 12 judges? Because you're only wasting time having it heard by 3 if the other judges on the 9th are not going to agree to go along with the 2 out of 3 decision. Just have them all heard by 12.
Well, very small percentage of cases are heard en banc, which which makes, I mean, when I talk small, I'm saying 5-6%, very, very low, which
they're very specific cases,
which
Rachel.
makes it even worse that they do en banc in these gun rights cases, because
But see,
obviously
and-
they're
and
picking those.
I'm expecting some of this with Kamala Harris to come out, because the true fact is that she had no legal right to even get involved. And the fact that the court allowed her to get involved at the end of it was ridiculous. But what it truly showed is how our government works. Our government works only for the government. In other words, you have to keep going through hoops and garbage if you want the government to do what it's supposed to do.
Okay, so that topic's
They
over.
just keep adding more to it.
So that topic's over. Now we got another topic, and JC knows more about it than we do. Evidently, California passed a law that opened up the disciplinary records of current and former police officers and said the public has the right to, that used to be they had absolute privacy as far as their discipline. California legislature came out and said, nope, we have the right to know who's done things wrong in law enforcement and how it was handled. JC found through the Union Tribune, I guess the newspapers out there collectively have been asking for these records. They found a female police lieutenant who is alleged to have embezzled $100,000 from her church, not from the government, but from the church that she attended. And they found out about it. And the church wanted to settle it within the church, but somebody tipped off the government about it. Law enforcement confronted the lieutenant, gave her the opportunity to agree to pay it back, and let her work 3 years, 3 months, whatever it was,
Right.
and retire and walk away with a pension. Now, that's not the only case in California that has been brought to light by the media, and I give credit, finally, to the mainstream media in Southern California and other parts of California for starting to ask these questions.
Well, let me comment on what is going to be the result of this.
Yep.
They're not going to discipline police officers anymore because it becomes public knowledge. And the theory behind that is it should be confidential, because then it will encourage disciplinary actions and make a better police department overall. And I'm sure that's the argument that the government made in the case. I would think it would be one of the arguments. For example, doctors, there's peer review that doctors do. And even if you're suing a doctor for malpractice, you cannot get your hands on peer review, because the theory is that they're not going to honestly review each other if they know that the information will someday get out somewhere. And so my fear is that there will be less and less disciplinary actions against police officers because they want to have everybody keep a clean record. But I believe that the disciplinary record should be exposed, but for every step forward, there may be 2 steps back.
All right, that topic's done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Rachel brought to my attention a newspaper article on March 10th in the Sunday Waterbury Republican. And these are, I used to do a section when I was on public access called I Read It in Bold Print. I go through the paper and I read all of the bold print headlines to see if anything piques my interest. Well, you got my interest with this one. Here's the headline. Quote, losing a newspaper is like losing the heartbeat of a town. End quote. Now, here's the next one. So who's checking government? Question mark. And then the bigger one is a fading light. Town by town, local journalism is dying in plain sight. And what this story is something that Rachel and I have talked about, and I think I even talked about it on a show, about the Hartford Courant in Connecticut is the oldest newspaper in continuous publication in the United States. It's the oldest one. All the others fell by the wayside. They are the oldest continuing newspaper in the United States. And there was a time when the Hartford Courant employed reporters who covered the towns. They physically got in their vehicles, went out to the towns, and talked to people like we do here about what's going on in your community. And they would go back and they would write stories. Well, then came the age of electronics, and communities started to broadcast their town council meetings, board of firearms, planning and zoning, tax review. All of these public meetings are on TV. Now the reporter sits home in their living room and watches the meeting on TV and takes notes, but never gets to talk to somebody who's sitting in the audience or who brings something to the podium at a public meeting. And I had said 20, 30 years ago that the mainstream media has become, rather than news gatherers, they've been news takers. They walk into town hall and there's a pigeonhole, a square hole, and the government takes press releases and says, the Hartford Courant, here's 20 press releases for the Hartford Courant. The government's spin on an issue. Shell Oil, here's a new press release about what happened when David Warden and his people were doing a First Amendment on. This is
press releases word by word.
And then you're absolutely
Pictures and videos.
You're absolutely correct. And then government says to a TV station, you don't need to get video from Mr. Playford, Mr. Peruta, Mr. Warden, or anybody else about the accident. We'll give you the photograph that you need. Okay? You don't need to send anybody to the big fire. Okay? We'll give you a photograph, and under it'll say, provided by the ABC Fire Department, provided by the ABC Police Department. So,
just to interject, the show that I'm talking about on Netflix, Truth and Power, the episode about citizen journalists where Mickey Osterreicher of MPPA is talking, he talks about how there are these sort of cordoned areas for the news to be in. He says, but you don't have to stay there. It started out as a convenience, but now it's become a way of isolating the media so they can just be spoon-fed what the news is.
They cannot question the government narrative of what happened at the scene because they keep you far enough back that you won't hear it, you won't see it, you won't document it, and you won't report it.
Hey, do you remember that terrorist attack in San Bernardino?
Yes.
There's a picture I took from there that we have posted up. And what it shows is me on one side of the fence and all the mainstream media on the other side of the fence. And they're in somebody's backyard versus standing on the street corner with me.
There is a clip at amnewsnetwork.com, and we've played it here on Summary Judgment. Not News, maybe up on News Now San Diego, but it was never on News Now Houston, when the New Britain police sergeant picked up my camera and tripod and walked away with it. I arrived at the scene, and WVIT Channel 30 had their talent, that's the reporter, and the cameraman, and their tripod, and they were like 500 feet down the road at an intersection, and there was yellow tape up. And I walked right past them, lifted up the yellow tape, walked up the sidewalk, stayed on public property, never went into the crime scene, never went into an evidence field, and started to film what was going on. And I was confronted by a patrolman. And he told me you had to move. And I said, I'm not moving. And all the time I'm talking, over the patrolman's shoulder, I can see the mainstream camera 500 feet down the road, never hearing what I'm saying, never recording what I'm saying, but my camera was rolling, my phone was rolling, and that is what's happening today, is they want to keep all cameras away from the action so that they can put in their report whatever they want to put in their report, and it can never be questioned by rock solid video evidence. Here,
Correct.
okay? And I've told the story 100 times about a young 16-year-old kid who was involved in an accident. It was a fatal, and I have a letter around here someplace from the mother that I videotaped the accident, and she was very upset that her son's accident made it to TV. She hired a private investigator. The private investigator came to me and said, "May I have a copy of your video?" I said, "Absolutely." And I provided the video. I provided the video to the investigator, and the investigator went to the law enforcement and to the prosecutor and said, in the report, it claims that this 16-year-old male was operating his vehicle without the lights on. And that's why they charged him in the accident, is operating without his lights on. But I got there soon enough, and my camera captured the fact that the lights in his vehicle were on when I got there. What happened was the fire department went in and cut the battery cables, cutting the electricity to his car, and shut the vehicle off and the lights off. And when the cops got there were no lights on. So they arrested him for that. And the mother sent me a letter thanking me for being at the scene and recording the evidence that had the charges against her son dropped. And I've always considered that letter as justification for people with cell phones and cameras and recording what's going on. And it's ballooned today. Like this segment that Rachel's talking about, they're talking about everybody's got a camera now, and everybody becomes part of the media, which we've been saying for years.
Just going to tell you you're not.
I know.
Yeah, well, everybody, I mean, the beauty of it is everybody takes part in holding the government accountable. And that's the way it was meant to be from the beginning of this country.
Day one.
But we got away from that, and we abdicated our responsibility and just let the media do it, or just let certain organizations do it. And I think it's really a beautiful time for this to be happening.
There's a segment of the program Rachel's talking about of
Yes, government does not like it because, after all, who wants to be held accountable? We all kind of want to do what we want to do and if you're going to do it, you want to get away with it, right?
How many
And
times?
when you're held accountable, then you can't get
How
away
many
with
times-
it, and your job isn't as easy anymore.
How many times do we sit back and we say, God, I wish I thought of that. We didn't think of that. For example, we were not aware of the value of body camera footage until the foreign case came. Now, if you go to summary judgment on YouTube, on the homepage, there is a video clip of Sean Foreign being arrested in Naugatuck, Connecticut.
And I am getting ready to upload the transcripts of the hearing that's related to that incident
How
because
many words did they change in the transcript like they do in San Diego?
a lot of people are interested. Now, interestingly enough, JC, in Connecticut, there was a policy by the judicial branch just implemented in November 2018 that any court proceeding, with some very few exceptions, held after November 1st, 2018, you can get the audio of it.
But they don't want you to be able to get anything prior to November 1st.
Yes, and this is a hotly contested issue in a case that's been brought to our attention by a viewer where there's memoranda being filed in briefs because somebody is saying, I want audio from something that happened before November 1st. So we're watching that closely to see what happens there. But this is something, JC, that people do bring up. Ed has a compelling, unfortunately too long story for today about something that happened to him. The child support issue. Remember, the transcript was wrong?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the transcript was wrong. That could have greatly affected your life, and you proved it.
And I can explain it in very brief terms.
Okay.
I was brought into court in Connecticut for failure to pay child support to a wife and children in Florida, my second wife. And every time the court completed, they would make a transcript and send it down to my ex-wife. She would read it, and then she would call up to the prosecutor and make comments about what I said or didn't say. And the prosecutor came in one day and said, it was January of 1986. The judge came in, the prosecutor came in, and the prosecutor said to the judge, Mr. Peruta has lied to the court. Last time he was here, he said that he gave $4,316.35 to his wife. His wife has read the transcript and says that's an absolute lie. And so I said to Judge Cavello, he's now a federal judge, but I said to Judge Cavello, I said, Your Honor, I object. I never said that. And the prosecutor held up the written transcript in court and said, Your Honor, it says it right here. Well, I was able to go like this. Well, Your Honor, I have a tape recording of the last time I was here, and I didn't say that. And right away they looked at me like I had three heads and said, You have a tape recorder? Yes. You're tape recording right now? Yes. And you tape recorded the last time you were here? Yes. Well, you're not supposed to have a tape recorder. I said, well, I do. They appointed a lawyer, and then I got to look at the transcript. And here's what happened. When I was in Florida, I lived at 4316 16th Court. They have streets, courts, avenues, and places on a grid in Florida. And what the court stenographer had done was taken an address, 4316 35th Court, or whatever it is, and turned it into $4,336.38, and change. And I said, wait a minute. That's not supposed to be a dollar amount. That's supposed to be an address. And they checked it. It came out that I was and when I came back the next time to court, they had metal detectors in the family court so that nobody could get a tape recorder in the building. But think about it. The court reporter had created an official transcript that was, according to the prosecutor and the judge and everybody else, this is the official record of what happened in court, when in fact it was not. That's the story.
Isn't it funny how government doesn't want anybody recording it? Now, why wouldn't the courtroom want you recording your own trial?
They don't want any competing narrative. Now, let me tell you, when you give a deposition in a civil proceeding and the transcript is printed, you have a chance to go through, it's called read and sign. You go through the transcript, you read it, and if you see anything weird in there, there's an errata sheet at the bottom, you can correct it. They don't, and that's in civil cases. In criminal cases, they don't give you that opportunity. Now, where would it be more important to have that opportunity than in a criminal case, right? I had a civil case where the woman was very thoroughly reading through her transcript, and I can't remember what the question was, but she had said, I don't, N-O. I don't know. But what the transcript said was, I don't know. I-D-O-N'-T-K-N-O-W. Now, you can see where those two things could mean completely different things depending, really on the question. But if you can hear it, then you know the difference between I don't know or I don't know. You can tell by the intonation which the person meant. And so this issue does come up time and time again. And how, like in baseball where they have instant replay, how do you determine what the accurate language is? You go to instant replay in sports, and in the case of courts, you go to the tape. You don't rely on hearsay. I mean, if you think about it, a transcript is nothing but hearsay. It really is. That's all it is hearsay. It's what was said, and it's somebody else writing down what they heard was said. That's not admissible in court usually, right?
But you know what's funny? Okay, is when you get into these recordings in court, okay, you have a police officer, anything you deal with government, okay, they want to talk to you, they put a tape recorder out in front of you. You go square off with the police, you go square off with things, they want you to talk or make statements, they want a tape recorder. They don't want the hearsay handwritten, they want a tape recorder. Like you, the defendant, can't use a tape recorder to record them in court.
Well, luckily,
Everything they want recorded, but when you want it recorded, fuck you.
well, you know, I have a point of view on that. Where if you're giving a statement to a police officer and they want it recorded, I kind of like that idea. Actually, here in Connecticut, they kind of try to avoid recording it, and they write the statement for you, and then you have you sign off on it. So I certainly am in favor of police officers recording statements, but you should be able to record it as well.
For anybody on the other side, for anybody on the other side of the camera, I want to
In
see if
today's world, with technology being what it is, there should be a camera pointed at every judge at every hearing. There should be a camera pointed at every prosecutor and every witness.
and every defendant.
And I was going to the defendant.
All right.
Camera should be recorded everything that comes from all of those people throughout the entire ordeal. And with today's technology, I should be able to watch it at home. And by us watching it at home or on our computers, where millions of us can watch it immediately, is the best way to hold these bastards accountable. And why are they fighting that so hard? Is because of accountability.
JC, give me a minute. I don't know how many people are watching this today. I don't know how many people will watch it on YouTube when we're done.
What's your point?
But it goes like this. Have you ever got a call from a collection agency? Now, I pay all of my bills. But have you ever got a call from a collection agency and it goes like this? Mr. Peruta, my name is Mr. Smith from ABC, and this is a call to collect a debt. You are on a recorded line. And I say, fine, but I just want you to know that I'm also recording the call. And then they come back with, if you're recording the call, I cannot speak to you.
See, but I do not get offended by that, because that is a private company and you can deal with them or not.
But your government's doing it too.
Right. That's what I'm offended by. You know, private companies can be jerks.
I'm not saying.
But when I pay taxes, I expect the government not to act that way.
I'm not saying that what
or even if I don't pay taxes.
I'm not saying that what they're doing recording me is wrong. I'm not saying that their refusal to talk to me if I'm recording it is wrong. What I'm saying is this is an example of an entity, government or private, wishing to record my call looking for something incriminating on tape.
Right.
And when I say to them, okay, I'm going to record it, and what I say is going to be recorded, and they go, we can't talk to you.
You know what we need to do about that? We need to call Senator Richard Blumenthal.
Fuck him.
Our senator from Connecticut, who is so on top of consumer protection issues. And we need to say to him, Senator Blumenthal, we need a law where it's illegal for a collection agency or any private company saying they're going to record me and not allowing me to record them in turn.
Or there should be a very liberal policy in this country, in every corner of this country, where it is totally permissible for anyone to record any communication they have where they are a participant.
Yeah.
Speaking of recording, that red light on cameras. Any of you know where that came from? How that got there?
No.
The federal government made that happen, so you couldn't record people privately without them knowing.
That's
It's
called
actually- it's an actual law.
it's
a
called
federal law.
it's called a tally light. And on my cameras they are shut off.
And they should be. There should not be a law stating that. And some of them, why is not every security camera got one?
Well,
Why is it just the individual person
The-
has to have it?
the show that Rachel is talking about, what's the name of it again?
Truth and Power.
Truth and Power, the segment of recording. Every person should be smart enough to hit the record button whenever they're talking to anybody in government. Because I got to tell you, there are things that have happened in my life where I'm sitting at home, get a phone call, or make a phone call to get information, and that person on the other end of the line sounds so out of control, not knowing what they're talking about, that you just sit there and let them dig their hole. And I haven't recorded it. And somebody made a fortune on YouTube because they started to record the calls that were coming into him and started to show the tapes on YouTube about customer service.
Well, you got anything else, JC? Because we're going to wind it up here with a couple of loose ends that we have also on this Netflix series, Truth and Power. They have episode about Stingray, which I know Kimberly Dvorak, who JC knows, Ed knows, and I know, had kind of, I don't know if she broke that story, but she certainly followed that story at its near inception. Yeah.
It talks about the,
Using it.
it talks
Wait, let JC, can you start again? Go ahead.
I said, and they're using it to arrest people. I know people have actually been arrested due to stingrays
right.
Yeah, anybody who's
because they're just mass surveilling the public.
right. Yeah, I mean, anybody who's interested in learning more about it, it's all, obviously it's all over the internet. And, we had, a couple years ago, we were hot on this issue of these fusion centers that are all over the country that were created by the Homeland Security Act. And here in Connecticut, they call it the Connecticut Intelligence Center. And we know firsthand that they keep information on people who have not been convicted of anything and just highlight them. And when you go into a government building, if it's you, then extra attention is given. And we know that for a fact because we uncovered it quite by accident with regard to one client.
Yeah, really.
Anybody who shows an interest in government better get ready to get bullied and beaten.
Well, keep up the good work. We're going to show your video now. We got it queued up. Tell us a little bit about it. This is the water issue in Welton.
Yeah, actually, the event's been going pretty good. The cops are nothing of what we're being led up to believe they're going to be, but today is the biggest event so far. Today is the big hula. But the police, I'm going to tell you right now, have been absolutely superb.
And what is the event?
Basically, a biker group went and pulled a permit for a redneck weekend. They're doing monster trucks, they're doing jumps, mud races. They're just partying on an 80-acre thing with their RVs, but, they didn't want any issues with the city, so they went and pulled a permit. The water district didn't like it, and it turned out that the person from the water district who didn't like it had the secretary, whose husband happens to be one of the supervisors. And the next thing you know, Yuma, Arizona has been in the headlines for E. coli because this is a farm area. And we've had a couple outbreaks, and Yuma's taken the brunt of it because that's where the outbreaks came. They actually tried to say they want to deny the liquor license because they don't want any more bad attention that might be created. The last thing they want is another Ebola or E. coli outbreak due to something these bikers might have done. And I'm thinking, well, E. coli is created from shit. Okay, these bikers are nowhere
JC, we got you up. We got you up in back of us. We're going to disappear and let everybody hear what you got to say.
We certainly went down an unexpected path after that question.
You know, but I will say this. I don't say it that often. You and the sheriffs are doing a fabulous job out here. They're not overstepping. They're not harassing. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're staying a distance and just making sure nothing happens.
Okay.
Kudos to them.
Okay, bye, JC. We're starting the video.
Most of you know who I am. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is J.C. Playford. I work with American News and Information Services. I'm the guy behind News Now San Diego and pretty much the News Nows that are running around the country on YouTube. Through my years of doing this, I've learned one thing, that each and every one of us are a target. If you're doing anything like we are, as far as holding government accountable, reporting what's going on in your neighborhood, and just the basic caring about your society that we all do, there's one thing we all know, that we have a target on our backs, each and every one of us. There's a lot of things that have come out about News Now Houston. Okay? Well, guess what, folks? I've been convicted of crimes that I haven't committed because I have a target on my back. And that's why we're in the federal courts and doing the things we're doing. News Now Houston years back was convicted of a crime. Okay? If he did that, I don't know. I wasn't there. But I do know this, it was long enough back to where he did his time. He went to jail. He paid his price to society. But it's amazing how right after he holds Houston accountable for one of the biggest stories coming out of there in years, with that nasty shooting that happened because of corrupt cops, all of a sudden David ended up with a target on his back. And all this new stuff supposedly came out. Well, folks, FYI. I'm going on the record to say I am supporting David and News Now Houston in this fight. And until he's convicted, and until his appeals have been heard, and until anything else has happened, that's my stand. Our government targets each and every one of us. I have been accused of grand theft auto from a vehicle I bought at a dealership just because a cop didn't fucking like me. I've had ex-wife accuse me of sex crimes against my own child. That turned out to be nothing but a crock of horse shit. Artemis Pyle. He either had to plead guilty or do 25 years for the same thing they were accusing Dave from News Now Houston of. Folks, this is America, and your government will do anything it can to divide you, to separate you, to make somebody a bad person even if they're not. All because some government person wants a notch in their belt. I strongly urge each and every person in this country to either support him in this fight or at least have the brains to sit back and wait for all judgment to be cast. Let's talk about Brett Kavanaugh. Same thing there. I don't even need to say anything about Brett Kavanaugh because everybody knows what I'm talking about. This whole country full of bullshit tried to convict him of a crime that never even happened. Never happened. Tried to accuse him of all this crazy sexual drunken that never happened. I was in the courtroom when Artemis Pyle was found not guilty. The first time around he pled guilty because he was looking at 25 years. or probation? Which one? Well, his victims are adults today. His alleged victims are adults today. And when I met them and spoke to them in his last court appearance, when they found him not guilty, the victims all pointed everything directly at their mother. My father never did anything, but he paid the price. I see the same thing happening here with News Now Houston. But I see a government that is reaching for something that it shouldn't be. J.C. Playford, until all appeals are heard, until everything's heard, and Dave's walking around as a free man today. That should tell you something. There's some things in the makings here. I believe Dave from News Now Houston is an innocent man at this time. And until I have real proof, I will always believe that. And I'm asking each and every one of you that get out there and want to hold your government accountable to realize what's going to happen when they come for me. Well, they went after Jeff Graves.
All right, he's going to be bringing us up.
They've gone
And
after
we got JC in the background.
They've gone after Jerry Nance.
It doesn't matter.
Let's talk for 1 minute about this Hollywood college money. What's the issue you got about bond?
Well, no matter what you think about what they did, paying and bribing people so their kids could get into college, it's wrong, whatever. But why are they putting bonds of $1 million on these people? A bond, the purpose of a bond is so you don't flee. Really, where's Felicity Huffman going? Where's Lori Loughlin?
And here's what
going?
I have. And here's what I have to say. The college aspect, I think, is only the tip of the iceberg. If these people are willing to pay this kind of money to get their kids into college, how much were they willing to pay to get them in the National Honor Society or to pay off a high school teacher to pass them to get them out of high school to get them into college?
Yeah, I want to talk next week also because JC had mentioned, why doesn't everybody plead not guilty and stick together and whatever? Well, my understanding of the way this whole college scandal came to light was a Yale dad was being prosecuted for securities fraud or something like that, and he turned around and said,
I got a story.
Boy, do I got a story for you. And that's why you're never going to get people who are defendants in criminal actions to join together in anything because everybody's looking out for themselves.
We're out of here.
See you next week.
Next week.